General Protocol Spaces. Banking on Freedom.
Yes, welcome to General Bull 19 event. I chose the topic of tech communication, but because that's something that John Moriarty, our guest, does well, but that's definitely not the only thing he does. And so we'll talk about tech communication in BCH ecosystem and other topics. But I don't know, maybe we'll just get started with that one. But welcome, John. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, and we've talked before on here when you came up on stage a few times. It's always a pleasure. We talked about the electron and the thing that you were working on that and media. And so I thought we could get into more detail about all of those this time. I actually have a long list of things to ask you about. So I'm just going to run through them as we get through the discussion.
Yeah,
so I'll list up some of the things that you have worked on, and I'm sure I don't have all of them for the audience to know the kind of things that you work on. And then I was hoping you could tell us, like, are these kind of representative, or do you see yourself as how do you see yourself and how do you frame all this stuff that you do? So most recently, one of the very important things that John did was he helped Bitcoin Cash Autist to improve the writing on the ABLA chip, on the block size, the max block size chip. So it was in a state where it was technically very good. The specification was very good. But then, even as a technical person, myself, reasonably technical person myself, when I read it, I felt like I'm not really sure it communicates all the things that it needs to communicate and to all the right people. And so John helped Bitcoin Cash Autist to rewrite a lot of the chip so that it's more accessible, more clear, more laid out for the right audience and so forth. And I think that was a big success. Another thing John has done, which we at General Protocols really appreciate, he wrote a whole script and made a whole video about how the AnyHedge contract works. This was back before BCH Bull even existed, I think. Right, John? It was back before that.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, that was actually going to be working with D-Token before.
Yeah, D-Token, that's right. That's right.
There was a whole other section of that video that, was describing the D-Token interface and what was going on there. And unfortunately, that kind of fell apart, but it was nice that I got far enough in the project that when BCH Bull was coming into existence, or was maybe just like, entering beta as opposed to alpha, I was able to squeeze a little piece of that project out of itself so that it would be useful.
Nice. Yeah, it was a great video. I use that all the time when people want to know how it works. There's a lot of people who prefer video, and I'm like, here, read the white paper, and they're like, no. There's a lot of people who prefer something lightweight, digestible, and the video, of course, it's very quick and it's visual, so people can grasp it very quickly. So that's very helpful. There's the Electron. I don't know what to call it. The remake, reskin, redo of the user experience on Electron, which we discussed a little bit before. You've made a number of videos about like what money is and why what we have is not great. There's a bunch of videos you've made about that. So they're kind of economics or monetary type videos. And then you've talked about specific use cases like remittances. And then there's this whole other aspect of the stuff that you do, which you've mixed in as well, right? Like music. You're a musician, so you make music. You've made videos, music videos, songs about Bitcoin Cash and why it's important, and try to make it fun. I think you did some stuff explaining DAA, like previous chips also. Anyway, a long list of things. And they're quite diverse too. So I was wanting to ask you, like, of all those things, did I miss a whole aspect or like other things, or how do you see all this stuff that you do? Like, how do you think about what it is that you do?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and I'm not necessarily like super on top of the answer to that question. I can tell you at least sort of early on, like when I was getting more involved in Bitcoin stuff, I sort of considered myself like a writer. I'm someone who's going to write some stuff, because I think there are things that need to be said, and nobody's saying them, so I'm gonna say them in as clear and succinct a manner as possible. And it was, I guess it was probably still pretty early on that I also started the Bitcoin Out Loud channel, but it was kind of a direct reaction to realizing like, oh, nobody wants to read. So it was like
Nobody wants to read.
This has evolved since it used to be that nobody wants to read. These days it's more like nobody wants to watch anything over 1 minute. But yeah.
Right, isn't that interesting? So it was like, okay, read my stuff, and then it was like, okay, I'll be Bitcoin Out Loud, so you don't have to listen. And now it's like, is the only way forward TikTok and YouTube Shorts? Maybe so. If so, that's the way it's got to be.
Interesting. So you saw yourself or see yourself as a writer primarily. Like that's how you see your main skills is writing.
At least that's where like a lot of my experience is, and what I like sort of would consider myself like, okay, like what do I really bring to the table? It's like, well, I can get a script to a workable state. And then there's been a lot of stuff like video production and even just lighting and stuff where it's like, oh, okay, I've become, very, very mildly proficient. But that's more just because I felt like I had a job to do, right? I have all these darn opinions and things to add to the conversation. And how do you get them said and listened to? But then, of course, it's not like just about getting heard. It's about like making a difference with the things you say. And sort of course, that influenced my decision along the way, because there's to some degree, and it's even true maybe with some of my earlier video essays. I've got some earlier stuff on my YouTube channel where I'm just like, are miners a trusted third party? Here's why, not really. Maybe sort of, kind of, from one perspective, but not really. And a lot of these things are either addressing narratives that I think need to be like sort of not necessarily just shot down, but just like debunked. Like, all right, if I need a reference, and maybe everyone else does too. Like, with kind of my hope for when someone says, yeah, but miners are processing transactions. Like, wouldn't it be great if we just had a video to forward everybody that was like, well, here's why that's not really a trusted third party, at least from the perspective of and the goals that we have as creating a decentralized currency, yada yada yada.
Oh, okay, I see. That was your motivation for making some of those past videos, was like debunking nonsense that, or not to frame it as nonsense, but ideas that people have that are not really, they don't fit with reality.
Yeah, and
for whatever reason.
I think that at least the goal of my video might be to have it so that the viewer says, "Oh, that idea was nonsense." Like by the end. And
I see. But you decided to stop making those, or are you still interested in that kind of? Because I mean, I don't know. There's definitely a place for those, right? Where you're in a conversation and it's a positive conversation, a constructive conversation, and you're not in like a dunk mode with somebody. And they're like, no, this idea. And you're like, no, oh my God, hold on. Like, we need to stay 3 steps back so that I can explain why, this concept that you have, it doesn't really gel with reality. But that takes a long time. And if there are materials available, like if you have videos or, Bitcoin Cash podcast or whatever, the FAQ, that kind of thing, they're really valuable to be able to just point somebody at it. Are you still making those?
So not so much like, yeah, it's still making. So that kind of video is definitely still on my radar. And what I sort of refocused myself as, like when I was done, with that sort of long string of, well, I was not even done with the long string of videos, but when I just happened to stop making as many of those videos, it was kind of more along the lines of like, okay, am I making sort of the difference that I want to be making? Is just having a video to point back to say, look how super right I was. Like, is that good enough? And I think the answer is like sort of obviously no. Whereas like maybe when I was making the videos, the answer would have been yes. It would have been like, I just need to get this out there. What on earth are we doing?
You're right. This doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work like that. None of this works like that. I see. So since then you've had a feeling that there's other things you could do that would be more valuable.
Right, or at least I've, it's the constant state of experimentation, especially for me when like it's sort of like, okay, yeah, John, what do you consider yourself? What do you do? And it's like, well, there's sort of like, what do I consider myself, and then what do I do? And then there's the whole thing. It's like, wait, isn't what I do more what I am than what I consider myself to be? Because if that's maybe a bit existential for this, like, oh, am I really like actually 90% just a Rocket League player? No, okay, I do a little more than that. But if we're talking about how I end up spending my time, it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I end up spending most of my time editing a script so that it's so stupidly short that anyone within it, it requires the minimal amount of attention span, as long as you have a desire to like stick around. But after a lot of those earlier videos, then I sort of shifted towards longer form explainer videos with the hope that it would be something that, with a little bit of higher production quality in the animation, would be something that people would be into. And so
yeah, animation and explainers goes a long way to keeping you engaged in what's going on somehow, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. And so the first version of that form, longer form kind of explainer content, was the difficulty adjustment algorithm video. And that one didn't have the higher production quality. It was just me doing really basic stuff in motion stuff with text and a few diagrams and things. But since then, I've worked on some bigger projects, like Is Bitcoin Bad for the Environment? Like that was just an enormous project, and I feel like not many people have seen the video. It maybe doesn't seem all that relevant to the Bitcoin Cash audience because they're already sold on like, well, Bitcoin is like a good idea, and unfortunately it's been hijacked, yada yada. There's this other stuff we're worried about, as opposed to like, oh, is Bitcoin bad for the environment? But that was one of the early experiences in like, okay, it's like 5 minutes of really dense explaining, and there's something on screen for almost everything I say that ideally would keep people engaged. And it was a great experience making the video, and I think it turned out pretty well. But it also like hasn't taken off, like it hasn't gotten the huge views. And I've experimented with some YouTube ads, and experimenting with different places to get it shown just around the world, and figuring out kind of, okay, where are all the click farms? There's all these things that you don't really think about when it's like, oh, okay, I want to advertise a video. How can I get this in front of eyeballs? And it's sort of maybe not so surprisingly, but also maybe surprisingly not as easy as you think, even with a budget.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the same thing we talk about all the time with apps, where, I mean, obviously not exactly the same thing, but so similar, where you've done a proof of concept, or you've even done a really nice like basic app or something like that. And that the whole build it and they come idea is just wrong in 99% of the cases, right? That is absolutely wrong. Getting stuff in front of people and making it interesting and making it getting traction on it is incredibly hard. Yeah, so taking something from, well, I did the thing, to I did the thing and it made a difference is a huge chasm. Like there's a huge gap there. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a situation where I think Jeremy from the Bitcoin Cash podcast does an excellent job. And I think I'm sure a lot of it, I can't say for sure because I'm not the most consistent guy when it comes to content output. But I think one of the things that would have made a big difference for me, if I could, light a fire under my butt, is consistent output. Just keep making good stuff. It's got to keep coming. Even if I, produce one video a year of evergreen content that quote unquote should do really well in the long term, if I'm not building an audience, it's maybe not going to pay off like I would hope it would. But I would say just that his FAQ is enormously valuable. As
it is.
It's sort of ended up being the thing that I wanted my videos to be, of just like, all right, it's this question. Okay, go here.
Yeah, and he's spent a lot of work on those to make them, but at the same time, he doesn't spend too much work on them, right? He does them and there's stuff there, and then I'm sure he has a very long list of ways to improve it, like anything that we make. And it's like, yeah, I'll improve it when I can, right? Like not letting perfect be the enemy of good, I think it's a good place for that, to just keep making content. And then every piece of content is just another roll of the dice on whether you'll be able to get somebody's attention, learn something from it. Yeah. How do you get feedback on the stuff that you've made? Like, how do you decide if you're making a difference or not? Do you have any way? I mean, that's a very hard question. That's not an easy question at all, right?
Yeah.
Determining whether your marketing is effective is it's a whole industry, right?
Yeah, well, and it's funny, as much as like the work I've done in the Bitcoin Cash space, and in even like the the more sort of semi-official positions slash jobs I've done have been in the marketing vein. I'm definitely not a marketer by trade, and so I pretty much lack all the expertise and skills required to really measure my own success. Which is why, like, over time, I've sort of realized, okay, well, how maybe the best way to do it isn't so much to like measure my reach, but more measure the value of what I'm doing by raising funds to make it, and then sort of using that as a gauge. If I get funded, it's valuable enough, at least for, well, I guess for me, right? Because I'm the one who decided the funding amount and the project I wanted to do, and then whoever funded it funds it.
Thought it was worth it. Yeah.
Flipstarter has really probably been the best feedback mechanism so far. And I've looked in a little bit, just Google Analytics and stuff, and it's like I'm not really sure how much I can take out of that. And the little bit I even did, so I did a little bit of Google Ads stuff myself, and it's like, okay, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. Let me go to Fiverr and see if I can find someone who knows like Google Ads. But as I'm sure anyone who's messed around with trying to find a freelancer will know, like, determining whether the freelancer you have and has any idea what they're talking about is an entire adventure in and of itself.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so the truth is, to some degree, the projects I'm working on are just in constant panic mode. It's this feeling like I need to finish this project, and as long as I finish this project, everyone will see how awesome everything is. And then when that's not the case, it's at least it's not a complete defeat. It's like, oh no, okay, well, what's the next project that's going to do it? And that's I think even maybe on a previous space, you or someone else might have said like, hey, if doing the same thing harder, like working harder, isn't necessarily always the best choice. But if you're curious about like my motivations and where, what gets me to do the next thing I'm doing, a lot of times, admittedly, that is it. It's, what do I think really needs to be done, and how panicked am I about it?
How urgent does it feel? Okay. And so you said Flipstarter has been the best feedback mechanism that you've had, just in the sense that if it gets funded, do people talk to you a lot before they participate in, before they contribute to a Flipstarter, or do they mostly just contribute directly to exactly what you put on the page?
Well, I think I've only run like 2 Flipstarters for Bitcoin Out Loud stuff, like video stuff, and those were funded pretty quickly. And I get the feeling, it's like, oh, if you're going to get funded, you may not hear a lot, but if you're not going to get funded, you might hear a lot. And so, like, when I was running the first Electron Cash Flipstarter, I got a whole lot of feedback about, like, why the scope of the project may not have been appropriate, and why people might not be giving me money. And that was the situation where I ended early. And even though I think there was a decent chance I would have gotten funded, just because I've built up trust with a decent portion of the community, and there's some folks out there that may or may not have been willing to sort of push that over the edge. Flipstarter sort of forced me. It's almost kind of like the chip process, right? It forced me to just put it out there. Hey, here's the plan. Here it is. Take a look. Give me money? ? But also sort of underlying thing is, oh, but if you're not going to give me money, like, yeah, tell me what's up. Like, to tear into this thing that I've tried to put together. And if it needs to be torn down and rebuilt, then it will be.
I see. I don't know. I feel like it's an evolution that still needs to happen with flip starters, where people don't consider taking something down to be the end of the world. It should be expected that the first thing you put up, unless you're highly experienced at putting together project proposals, it should be expected that you totally fuck it up and make a shit proposal the first time. That should be normalized, right? Like, and you get feedback and you improve it. That should just be the way it is. But unfortunately, it's still like a very, I can't take it down. Like, don't give me any negative feedback. Don't say anything negative about it because it might cause people not to fund it. And it's like, well, I think we want it to be the best thing possible, right? I hope that can improve, and people kind of like start to raise the bar on things. But yeah, I totally see what you mean, that it's like, if people say something, it means it's not good. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I see. So it has been good for feedback.
You're gonna hear about it at least, if it's negative feedback, and that's a good thing. I agree. It would be great if we could kind of figure out the whole like it's okay to fail thing, but that's like, when you put it that way, that's like, oh, maybe we just all need to go to therapy. Maybe we all need to find out why it's okay to fail, and how not to.
I mean it more from the funding side, like people who are going to fund things. I really wish the bar would be higher from that side, not because I mean it's like a conversation, right? A project or a proposal is a conversation. When you're looking for funding for something, whether it's a company or a startup or a project or product, whatever it is, you say this is what I'm going to do, and somebody says, well, I would fund something like that, but that's not really what I would want to fund for some reason. That's like a normal conversation to have. So yeah, that's what I mean. I don't mean that people putting up proposals should necessarily change. There's always going to be learning process and things. I just would like to see it be a learning process as opposed to like a standoff, like, is it going to pass or not? Just a binary.
And I haven't looked into it much, but BCH House or Beach House or whatever it is, which has like Flipstarter stuff built in, but it's also a social network. Yeah. I'm confident that something like that at least has the potential to round out the Flipstarter process a lot, and maybe make sort of the back and forth communication between potential funders or current funders and someone proposing a project, just make those connections easier to make. Because right now, like we have the really basic, tools. We have tools, but maybe not, the most ergonomic handles if we're gonna milk this.
right. The conversation isn't built into the Flipstarter itself. Yeah, that's so true.
If you want to have a conversation, then like in addition to running a Flipstarter, you also have to have communication channels. And if you're not like already a public-facing person, generally, what do you do? And I know I'm lucky that I've been a public-facing person, so I can just be like, "Hey, I'm me. If you don't know me, here's me. Here's like 3 links that are me," and it's it's a bunch of semi-digestible content, as opposed to saying like, I don't know, here are my GitHub projects. You can audit them if you know what you're talking about, but here's I don't know what the solution is necessarily. Kind of obviously I don't know, else I'd be rich or doing it.
Oh no, you can definitely know the solution and not have the resources to implement it. That's my daily reality. Do all kinds of things.
Of course, I guess I could say until it's implemented, I can't know for sure it's the solution. There's
right,
but yeah, there's plenty of solutions floating around.
I see. Yeah, okay. So yeah, and not only on the front side, but on the back side also. So there's been an obvious lack of communication on the backside after a project is funded in many cases, maybe most cases. So yeah, I'd really like to see that expectation increased as well, where after it's funded, there's a link for it, right? There's a place like this is where to go to see progress updates. There's a link for it on Flipstarter. But do people actually update? Very few do in reality. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
hopefully
So
something like
that's where you get
Reach Out
feedback.
would make a big difference. But maybe Flipstarter needs its own even sort of dedicated tool. It's like, oh, that link you provide is just another tool provided by people who think Flipstarter is really important, and you interact with it in your own specific way. So it's maybe we shouldn't be linking to like, oh, here's my social media. Yeah, I'll post there when I have an update, but also follow me there so that you can see my, cringy meme reposts. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that isn't best. Maybe we need a place where it's like, oh no, this is the Flipstarter update mechanism.
Yes. I think the social media platforms have proven that. The standard ones that work with fiat credit cards and so forth, like Patreon or Kickstarter, whatever, they have very specific place and forum communication channels for you to talk and for you to interact with the people who have supported you. And I think those make all the difference. That whole social interaction makes all the difference on those things for people to be able to build up reputation and so forth. So no, there's absolutely something to it. And it also give you a platform, so to speak, for where to propose new ideas without having to actually put yourself up for failure with a new campaign and then, go through that process. If you had a platform that was there with an audience that already supports you and knows what you do and supports what you do, then that would be an obvious place to have a discussion before you actually put something up. So there's definitely a place for it. And we've actually known that since the beginning. The very second article, I think, we wrote about Flipstarter was who will build the platform, because a tool is a tool. A tool is not a platform, and a platform is a whole thing that takes a lot of work to make and maintain. So yeah, it needs to be done at some point. Someone must do it.
Right.
So okay, let me ask a different thing. The work you did on the chip, I thought was great. The max block size chip, the upgrade that's coming this May to Bitcoin Cash. So could you tell us what did you think about the chip? Because I'm looking for what somebody else who might like to write a chip. What did you see in that chip that needed to improve, that you needed to change and to make it more accessible, or whatever it was? What was it that you saw so that other chip writers could learn from that when they're writing their chips?
Yeah, I guess one specific thing I remember. I mean, I guess it was maybe the first half-ish of the chip or so that I ended up doing any significant amount of work on. But even then, I think it was like the first 3 or 4 paragraphs. The intro, and then sort of the intro part of the meat of the proposal that
right.
I ended up doing the most work for. And for that, I mean, yeah, like I said, the one thing at least I specifically remember was like, okay, we need to state the use cases like right away, and that's something that doesn't happen a lot, especially if it's an upgrade that's like a technical upgrade. It's like, well, we don't even, and arguably we don't really know what's possible. Maybe, but that's almost not an excuse. It's like,
if you don't know what's possible, the chip shouldn't pass, really. Honestly,
yeah. Right? We should know some things are valuable. And so just starting from like, I want to enable this feature. This feature will allow for this, and this use case. And then even like I may not have gone too much into it for the Abla chip, but even on top of that, like, and this use case is valuable because X, and this use case is valuable because of X, and so on and so on. That's something that just in technical communications about upgrades in general would be my top thing to say to somebody making a chip. It's like, okay, like, get really practical really early, and then you get tech, and it's sort of like a news article. And again, like, I'm also not a journalist. I'm just, I've just done enough darn writing to feel like I do a pretty good job explaining stuff some of the time. But if you're doing a news article, it's like kind of the opposite of a story, right? Where like the story is the climax, like you're building up, you got to introduce everything. Whereas like no, like with a new story or something like, I think that a chip kind of also falls into this. It's like no, you get the most important stuff out first. The biggest thing is the headline, and then the absolute meatiest information is like the next 3 sentences, and then you just got a whole ton of details to go through. Whereas when people start writing about a chip, they really want to get into like, oh, and here's what's going on. It's like wait.
Yes, sorry, I was writing up. I'm going to share this in the Twitter thread and put it up here so that people can look at it. Okay, so that was the first thing that jumped out. I actually didn't know that you said. Okay, so basically, what are we doing here? Right? Like, why am I here? Yeah, that's a very good point. So,
see if I can bring up the Google Docs where I've like crossed out a bunch of stuff and rewritten a bunch of stuff. I'm not sure if I have it.
Well, so when I was looking at it, the first thing that I thought was, who's the audience, right? Whenever I write something, that's always the first question. Who is the audience? And based on your history with writing experience, I assume that's also one of the very first questions you ask. Did you ever come up with a specific answer to that question? Who's the audience for this writing, at least for this introduction?
Yeah, well, and it was definitely sort of either the original reason or at least the secondary reason before focusing so much on use cases, because I kind of figured, as much as it's going to be a technical document, support for an upgrade is going to come from businesses, and it's almost like how do you even define whether someone should have that much say? And it's like, well, that's a big decentralized question, right? But or a big question in decentralization. But one of the ways is like skin of the game, and obviously it's sort of what the Bitcoin is built around. So the little bit I thought about, like, okay, in addition to needing to like explain what the heck is going on really well, yeah, why are we here? And that definitely came down somewhat to, okay, I need to explain help explain the potential benefits just to sort of like someone with a long-term view of like, oh, I could build something. So I guess to some degree it was builders in my head, and of course that to some degree that's going to include businesses who are either going to be made up of people who are going to be building things or will be using things built by people who build things. I guess that's usually how it works.
Well, when I looked at it, what I thought was, the first audience for people like me or Imaginary Username or others who are part of the outreach discussion when upgrades are coming and you have to go talk to people and make sure everybody's actually upgraded, or earlier in the process when you're like, is this something that you're interested in? Is this something that you think would be good or bad for Bitcoin Cash as a business that uses the Bitcoin Cash network? And when you think of that audience, yeah, they're businesses, but anyone who might be influential there, if you put a very technical document in front of them where it just starts right off the bat in some kind of technical jargon, and you're lost from the first paragraph. That's a horrible first impression, right?
And then you end up with Taproot.
And then you end up with Taproot. Oh god. That was actually promoted by Poolin? That was so bizarre. I asked Alejandro about that, and I never got a good answer about why are you pushing this? I never understood it. There was definitely some politics behind it. It wasn't just a technical thing. It was bizarre. But yeah, maybe they were a special case because they were pushing it clearly. Yeah, but the other side, when you want to take it to somebody and ask for their opinion, you got to put something in front of them that they're going to be able to hold on to, get a handle on and have an opinion on, even if they don't understand all the deep technicalities of it. They should be able to put it in front of the right person that they know to say, hey, is this okay or not? But yeah, if they can't, then they're just going to say, no, I don't have time to spend on this. This is a technical document. And I think...
Yeah, let's take a look at it. I found the summary pre pre-edit, it was like, okay, we propose an exponentially weighted moving average based excessive block size adjustment algorithm. The core of the algorithm is a control function much similar to the weighted target exponential moving average difficulty adjustment algorithm, which was the other good candidate for the Bitcoin Cash DAA. And it was like, oh, okay, like we really want to. There was to be like, okay, here the proposal, and what is the proposal? Well, it's a control function, and it's got a weighted target exponential moving average, and these are the things that are like absolutely core to the decisions that were made in deciding the specifics of this proposal.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the proposal.
Right.
The proposal was we need an algorithmic block size.
Yeah.
And why do we need that? Political reasons.
Right. Right.
Practical, political, interpersonal reasons. And so that was probably the biggest shift, because then the beginning shifted to needing to coordinate manual increases to Bitcoin Cash's block size limit incurs a meta cost on all network participants. It's like, bang, that's bad.
Right.
Here's
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
and this is how BTC BCH split happened right here.
Calling it a meta cost is kind of an understatement.
In fact, I think that was something early on that I was like, we don't really need the word meta, and I think maybe Bitcoin Cash Autist was a fan of describing it that way. And I do kind of know what he means, but I also do know what you mean, where it's like, ooh, it's kind of just a cost, depending on how you think of it.
Yeah, it's meta cost is a cost. So yeah. Okay, yeah, well, I'm very glad you did that, because yeah, putting something in front of somebody where right off the first sentence they're like, I'm not interested. It's not a good thing to do with the chip, right? And I think what I was going to say earlier is I think that's a big thing that the ecosystem is learning. I don't know how to say this without sounding like an ass. If I sound like an ass, it's fine. So when Uname and others were working on the chip process, what eventually became what we call the chip process today, we had the point that we repeated over and over and over again, right? This is not a document for engineers. This is a document for everyone, for every stakeholder has to be able to hold on to this document and understand it at some level. This is not a purely technical document. And everybody's like, whatever. It's for devs. And it's like, no, like that took a really long time. But I think we're getting there, right? Where you can look at it and say, like, yeah, if only devs can understand this document, then of course nobody's going to support it. It would be like sending around a blueprint and being like, what do you think about this building? It's like, I don't know. I'm not an architect. I can't understand this blueprint really. I don't get the point of it. I don't understand the nuances of it. So yeah, it has to be a communicative document, much different from a BIP, from the BIPs that historically have happened in Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, and I'm really happy that y'all reached out to me to work on it, and that's the sort of thing. Just as a general, not shout out really, but it's the sort of thing. That's probably some of my like happiest place kind of work, is going into something that someone else has already put a lot of time into, and I can tell they put a lot of time into it. And their goal is to communicate, but then it needs me, it needs someone to go in and kind of tear it up, but not necessarily rewrite it, like chop and rearrange and rethink and rephrase. That's probably where I'm at my happiest, and
nice.
So that's worked out really well. And
all right, well, there you go. Chip writers, we always say team up with people. So if you're writing a chip and you're like, I don't know how to do this exactly, then contact John and ask him to help you out.
Yeah. The other thing that I've seen some people do is that they want something technical and then they write that technical thing, and then they leave it there. And for the rest, it's like, I kind of don't want to do this, or I'll put it off for later, and then it never gets done, and then it gets into this weird situation where they're incredibly frustrated why they don't push it. They don't push it. They wrote what they think they want to write. But yeah, it gets into that weird kind of situation. You have someone who can help you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Oh, go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
I would just say, yeah, definitely hit me up because that's the sort of thing I'm into, and it's also the sort of thing where I can't guarantee, of course, that I'm going to be able to take something and get it into an acceptable state because like that also obviously has to do with the uh, underlying ideas, and of course whether or not I even like want to work on something may, depending on my the size of my stash and how much time I have and how many spoons I have may influence whether I want to.
This
Do
stakeholder is not interested in this particular chip. Okay.
I am indeed one stakeholder, and I have some stake, and I guess that's what I have to say about that.
Nice. Yeah, no, yeah, what can you say? It takes a village to raise a chip or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, it takes a lot of things to do. You can't just write it up and be like, well, there it is. Everybody should now absorb this information and go forth and conquer. It's like, no, you got to do the go forth and conquering part even after you've written the technical or whatever part of it. Yeah. Okay, that's very cool. So yeah, I thought that was a very cool thing that you did to improve the chip, and that's a very important chip. And what you were saying about, sorry, what your name was saying about it, you can't just make the technical part. That was, again, I've said this many times, but Bitcoin Cash Authis did a phenomenal job of just suppressing his ego and getting from A to B from A to Z on the upgrades, the past upgrades, not the ABLA upgrade, but the past smart contract upgrades, getting those for cash tokens, what it ended up being cash tokens. Like he did so much work to just navigate and communicate and get feedback and pushback and accept and reject and modify and review and come back to people, and just persistently did that. And he went forth and conquered, and there it is, cash tokens.
And I guess it's even worth sort of reminding ourselves that like that, and maybe in the future, like a chip will be like a 50-person job. There's a lot of different types of things you have to do because it better be technically sound, but it also better be explained pretty well. But then you also need what you were just describing with Bitcoin Cash Authis, like the wherewithal and the willingness to adjust and update, and like you said, kind of put your ego aside and take the feedback that you're given, and also knowing how to identify good feedback. I mean, that's the skills it takes to create a technical document. Maybe there are a lot of people that should just be creating technical documents, but then there does need to be the established culture that like, oh, okay, but that's like step 0.001.
Right, yeah.
And now
Yeah.
there are many more things to do, and if you're not the one to do them, then you just can't complain. Is how
Yeah.
often does it just come down to okay, but don't complain. If you're not going to be the guy, if you're not someone, then you can't complain about the lack of someone.
Yeah, well, even with cash tokens, what ended up being cash tokens went through 100% rewrites on the technical side. That wasn't like, okay, we did the technical part, now we need to do the marketing part. No, it was like, okay, here's the technical part, and then it just got ripped to shreds several times. Right, not once, but several times. Whether it was from Bitcoin Unlimited or then Jason Drasner proposed PMV3, like both of those got just torn apart, right? There was various issues with them. And then eventually what emerged from that, yeah, there's no like waterfall process for any engineers out there who know that famous bad practice. Like you do one part and you're done. It's like, no. you every part is up for feedback. Okay. All right. Very cool. Thank you. That's cool. Yeah. The chip stuff was important. I'm glad you did that. And then The other thing I wanted, or the next thing on my list that I wanted to ask you about was, so you are in Bitcoin Cash, and it's rare for people to have been in Bitcoin Cash for a long time, like you have, without having some underlying, reason for it. Because right, because there's this long-standing stigma that's been there, and the people who are in it really get what they're doing, and they have a purpose, and they know why they're here in most cases, right? So, what is it like? I've never heard that from you. Maybe I wasn't listening, but I've never heard that. What is it that made you take a stake in Bitcoin Cash and put your social resources, your social capital on the line, making videos, making accounts, writing for it, spending time? What's driven that?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk a little bit about sort of just why I think Bitcoin is really important. I guess it's maybe a similar but slightly different question. Is like, okay, then why did I decide to start doing things? Because like I see Bitcoin as a way to take power away from people who have a lot of power that, quote unquote, shouldn't. I think.
Yeah.
I'll grant myself the use of the word "should" in that case.
Yeah. Nice. Good to be careful with that word.
Yeah.
I see. Right. So fundamentally, it's just like, well, Bitcoin is an important idea that deserves to be built up and explored and see where it goes. That's I think where a lot of original Bitcoiners came from, right? When it was worthless, they saw it as something that was super important.
And then earliest on, I mean, I guess, man, it's funny to even think back, like what was my history? Like, what was my schedule of like getting into Bitcoin and then it being Bitcoin Cash? I guess it was pretty shortly after the fork that I was like, well, Bitcoin Cash, pretty obviously. And I guess that's probably when I started writing more.
Nice. Yeah. I like that. A lot of people in Bitcoin Cash are just like, well, duh, obviously this is this is Bitcoin.
But of course things start up slowly, and at first I think, I'm just gonna put, like I said earlier, I'm just gonna put stuff out there because it needs to be said, and then slowly coming around to like, okay, in addition to putting stuff out there, I'm gonna do my best to make it accessible and desirable to watch, and then things keep just growing from there. And and I had like some YouTube presence with my music channel, and it's a lot of geeky music theory shit where I'm also explaining things. That's my primary thing. I love writing the music and sharing the music that I make, but the vast majority of what I spend time doing on that other channel is breaking down really technical, arguably cutting edge, like it's not in music theory textbooks, like microtonal theories and patterns and stuff like that. And so it's probably, I guess, really fundamentally come from a desire to explain. I'm just like, I gotta explain, and then like as I'm explaining it, then I'll realize how little I understand, and I'll go learn more, and then I'll try to explain it again. And it's in that process that I slowly, gain an actual understanding of things. That and arguing with people on Twitter. Those are the two reasons that I learn things.
PvP and PvE, the two modes. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Trying to get to the point where you can explain something it's well known, but it's still like just so true that and underused, even though it's well known, that just trying to teach something is such a good way to get to understand it, because you really kind of beat yourself to well, that doesn't make sense. Actually, I don't quite get this. I see.
Right.
So the work that you were already doing with music kind of led naturally, and writing led naturally to, well, let me explain these things that are really eating away at me because people clearly don't understand them. That was kind of the starting point.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty accurate way to put it. I mean, it was just, there's like some innate burning desire in me to not just understand something, but then and maybe it's all just like me being narcissistic and wanting to show that I understand it, but I'd like to think I'm also rewarded by the idea that, in order to do that, I have to impart that understanding. No one can know how much I understand unless I've made them understand it.
Weaponize your narcissism. I have a feeling you're not a narcissist, but it's possible. Okay. Now,
I guess we're probably all the narcissism spectrum, and then whether it's a disorder is a different question, But I'll keep my fingers crossed that I don't fall into that category.
let me ask a little bit deeper on that one. So, with an example of what I want to ask, because I don't know exactly how to ask it. So, I was in Bitcoin before, and it was just thought of it as an investment. And then when I saw specifically Antonopoulos flip, like do this weird, bizarre flip of narrative where he like clearly something changed. And he started talking about things in a way that didn't make sense to me anymore. I was like, wait, what's going on? I started having this cognitive dissonance right before this is in like 2014, 15 or 15, 16. And that cognitive dissonance, when I was like, there's something wrong here, was what led up to, understanding, oh my God, there's this whole political layer to Bitcoin, and it's currently in the process of jumping off a cliff. That was what triggered me to be like, okay, actually, I guess I should do something. And maybe this is important and I would like to do something. And so that was kind of the trigger for me, was realizing that there was something wrong and that it wasn't just going to fix itself. I had to see if I could do something also. Was there something like that for you, or was it just always you wanted to explain things about how things work?
Well, I don't know if there was something quite like that, but what I can say is like I was in our Bitcoin for a long time, and a lot longer than most people lasted, because I made like a point to be really thoughtful and not just thoughtful, but specifically cognizant of the fact that like, oh, this is a shithole, and I'm doing my best to like make a difference in the narrative, right? I wanted to be a reasonable voice, and so even before I was like writing articles or making videos, I was in our Bitcoin challenging people saying things that I thought didn't make sense.
And you managed to survive in there. Wow.
For a long time. And while I was already like pretty clearly like on the Bitcoin Cash side of things, especially because like the same way most Bitcoin cashers are like, no, I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm into Bitcoin, and we upgraded, and there was a big explosion, but I'm a Bitcoiner, right? And so to some degree, that's probably why I was like, well, I'm not just going to go over to our BTC, because I'm into Bitcoin. And so all these other people that at least think they're into Bitcoin, I got to be a reasonable voice in the conversation, providing the reasonable side that I consider to be the reasonable side of the argument.
Fight the good fight. You did.
And then eventually I finally did get banned after responding pretty reasonably, but not realizing the person I was talking to was a mod. And so
which one was it?
Oh, I don't even remember. I'd have to look back. You can find my post on our BTC. How to get banned from our Bitcoin would be extremely reasonable.
Right. Nice. Okay. All right. Okay. So you tried to fight the good fight. Okay. Yeah. Actually, on that point, so that was part of it. So that was part of what kind of triggered you to, I need to explain this stuff, because clearly people were not understanding it.
And a lot of that was like early on, just trying to understand SegWit. Like, what's really going on with SegWit?
Because what is this complicated thing? Yeah.
It's a kludge is like true, and I, to some degree, was like, on some level understood that it was a kludge and why it was a kludge. But it wasn't until like, going back and forth for hours on our Bitcoin with people that are trying to defend SegWit that I got even, a slightly more technical understanding of even just, the Merkle trees and, what's going on with the whole fact that it's like an anyone can pay, and like why does that mean? Why does that mean anything? That's where like I sort of like cut my teeth to some degree. Was like
right, actually starting to understand how things work. Okay. let me ask a question. Going even one more level on that one. So the way I describe the BTC BCH split is the BCH side, so to speak, was a lot of well-intentioned people who understood to a greater degree than the average person on our Bitcoin at the time how Bitcoin works, why it's important, and so on. Had a deeper understanding in a lot of most cases, based on my experience watching conversations. And then, but in the end, lost because the BCH side, because there was no BCH at the time, right? It was just Bitcoin. There was only Bitcoin. The people that wanted to scale reasonably brought a keyboard. What did I say? They brought a laptop to a gunfight. Is the way I describe it, because they came at it as a rational discussion as opposed to a political discussion where people are going to be playing dirty in politics, and they did. Did you feel that also? Do you think that's a fair kind of description? Bringing a naive approach to a real fight. Do you think that's what happened, or did you see it a different way? Because you were there, right? Like you were in our Bitcoin for longer than most.
I definitely have that resonates with me at the very least. I also somehow feel like it's tough to make that like the primary argument when so much else was like sort of stacked against us. So I think like we were absolutely sort of the naive side. I think that's absolutely the case. Uh, what do I think?
Did it feel to you, if I simplify it, did it feel to you that there was a lot of underhandedness going on in the effort to create a narrative that big blocks are bad and
Oh
so
yeah,
forth?
100 billion%. I mean, it was like
Right.
blatantly obvious to me that like
Yeah.
it was just really shady shit that for some reason was and it, like I say for some reason it was a combination of various reasons, like especially on say Reddit where it's like vote manipulation is Reddit is just it's like the worst, and we're all there, darn it all. But it really isn't a good platform, even if you take its sort of innate assumptions like voting, and even if everyone only had one account, like that's not really a good way to do it. Doing popular opinion going to the top is not a great way to do it. But then on top of that, it just absolutely goes to shit when when spoofing accounts is as easy as pie. And who are the people that are going to be spoofing accounts? The naive people that are trying to be reasonable,
Yeah.
or the side that again we can't know really if it was an active sabotage or whether it was an active sabotage for political reasons or for personal gain, or whether it really was just incompetence combined with the looking for personal gain. Whatever combination of stuff it was really shady and messed up. And yeah, it was definitely like it felt like we just got totally overwhelmed. Like maybe we brought a keyboard to a keyboard battle, but like what are 30 reasonable keyboards going to do versus 10,000 unreasonable keyboards, and then another
Oh no, it's a lot worse than that. But yeah, go on.
the numbers you mean like 300 versus 10,000?
Well, it's not even like versus a lot of keyboards. Like it's basically bringing a bunch of keyboards to fight in something that has nothing to do with very little to do with keyboards, basically. Like I think this a lot of it only became clear in retrospect, and some of that even like way after. But over the years, you gradually realize, oh, yeah, back then we were trying to win an argument as if it's a it's just in the forum thread, and then if you win, you win everything. But that's kind
Yeah.
of not how it works. Like well, you realize, okay, it's not nearly enough that you have to win arguments. You also have to do work. Okay, that's pretty obvious. So some people actually did work. And then it became even more obvious that after that, okay, it is not enough to do work. Uh, it is not enough to do work. You will also have to organize. Well, a lot of the time it just basically stopped there. And if you don't make, and as we learn much later, if you don't actually take charge and try to organize things, people will organize it for you, and you may not like the outcome. Um,
Mm.
and then um, and then you later realize, okay, it's not enough to organize. You also have to establish a way for your organization to be robust, right? And then you try to organize it to be robust, and then only after you organize it to be robust, then you can think about, okay, what is good to grow our own our own thing and defeat the other thing. Um, you know, so we climbed the ladders of all the steps over the years through basically lessons of blood and tears. Um, and back all the way back, we are basically at level 1 while the other guys are at level 6. It's
Yeah.
like it's a pretty ridiculous fight, and we just didn't really think about it because we were a bunch of keyboards.
Yeah.
Right. I guess that's a distinction worth making. It's like even just a bunch of individual keyboards versus at least a section of people that understands that it's a movement and there's going to need to be a process. And like you said,
Yeah.
if it's not the reasonable keyboards who are going to get together and define and establish and promote a process, then it's going to happen in some other way.
And what the guys are finding out today is they've learned that to some degree. Like the guys on BTC these days have finally started to learn that, but they're still playing at a low level game, right? They're playing like a meme game, while the guys that are actually in control, like Peter Todd, Luke, Greg, Adam Back, those guys, they're in the room with miners and so forth, right? They have them on the speed dial. They can talk anytime. I just revealed my age there. Sorry about that. So they can still talk to these guys anytime, right? They have working relationships with them. Yeah, and we just didn't or people who didn't take up the banner and make a difference back in the day. So hey, Uname, can I summarize that as I was writing a thing here? I said a summary of why reasonable blockers lost the BTC ticker is skill issue, right?
um,
Even if there were bad guys on the other side, let's say there were or were not, it doesn't matter. It's still a skill issue. Like you lost.
well, I mean, it's more like awareness of how wide the gap is. But
Yeah, and awareness was huge too, just because it was like the frog in the pot that apparently doesn't actually happen.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it really was it both happened so slowly and so suddenly that we were no longer the Bitcoin community. What like it as I think it's probably both like worth harping on both sides of that point is that like we were woefully underprepared
yeah.
and stuff happened that was not easy to deal with. Even if we were prepared, it would not have been like an easy narrative situation to counter and to organize around and to
Yeah, and yeah, the gap is not really like bringing keyboards to a gunfight. It's more like you bring keyboards, and the other guy's got is steering an aircraft carrier with an entire supply convoy. Like, that's how that's how wide the gap is. And right now, we learn from it. We built a pretty cool boat. It's getting there, but yeah.
Nice. Yeah, okay. All right. So you did feel that there was definitely some organized underhandedness going on the side of the small block
Yeah,
camp.
yeah, and but it doesn't matter how underhanded it is. They're organized. We're not, and they're
Yeah.
organized pretty competently in
Yeah.
many ways.
Yes.
So
Yes. Right. Yeah, so okay. Whether you agree or not, I'm gonna summarize it as skill issue because I love that phrase. It's so good.
it's like, oh,
Skill issue.
okay, we're not organized. So later, somebody came in and did the organizing for us, and we got in chain. So
Oh God. Yeah. That was a double failure there. Yeah, absolutely. All right, enough of that nonsense. Let's not dig any more in that hole. We're through that. Thank you, John. Though, so the other, yeah, actually, you mentioned your music, and that was the last thing I was going to ask you about. Was about music. Like, is there anything? Maybe it's not something you talk about. Maybe it's like a different identity you have, and that's not really appropriate here. But is there anything you would want to tell us, like as a musician? Because I mean, there's people in BCH who do everything, right? It's just a network of people who do, everything. It's just regular people. So I'm sure there's some people out there who are interested in the music that you do or whatever. You want to say a little bit about what it is you do with music?
Yeah, well, I guess there's sort of two sides of that, because like the stuff I do like on YouTube, microtonal music theory and composition and instrument design and things like that. That's pretty far removed from anything that was likely to be interesting to anybody who's not already a theory geek or frustrated with the current paradigm of musical instrument interfaces. But I will at least like point people towards, like, so one of the earlier goofy Bitcoin songs I did, and to some degree I wonder if I shouldn't just be doing more of that, because it's a good time and I think it has some mimetic potential.
Is that the
But
one that we're giving this a shot? That video?
actually, no, that even earlier than that was Buy Bitcoin Anyway. Have you seen that one? I'll find the link real quick, but it's one where I wrote and performed the keyboard part on one of my isomorphic keyboards, and so like the overlap is mostly just like I need an excuse. I need an excuse to write something. Well, I'm not gonna write a meta song. That's like the worst thing I feel like you can do. No offense to anyone who's done it, obviously, but like when you write music about the music theory you're using.
Okay.
I love the major scale. The major scale is minor, and it's really cool. And it's just like, I don't know, dude. I no bueno. So I'd rather write about cryptocurrency.
What was the name of it? I've never seen it. I don't remember seeing it. Was that on your other account that you do?
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay. Yeah, I remember
online.
seeing your microtonal keyboard, and I was just like, "Oh my God, what is this? This is insane!" You make like these physical overlays for the keyboard that lets you play in a different like physical space on the same keyboard, right?
Yeah, it kind of like it remaps the notes to a layout that then can be microtonal, but it's also just in general more like quote unquote logical and it's funny, like the word ergonomics, like people say, oh, it's much more ergonomic. It's like, no, not yet. It's much more logical. And the reason no one plays them yet is because we haven't figured out the ergonomics.
Oh, okay.
So
Interesting.
it's like what I've been digging into. It's like, oh, this whole concept of arranging notes in a 2D grid instead of in one dimension, even though pitch is one dimension, arranging things in 2D grid is like kind of cool. And not just kind of cool. It's like potentially groundbreaking, has all these cool implications, but nobody plays these instruments and nobody makes them, and so that feeds back into itself constantly. And so I was like, well, I can fix this. I'm going to like put some really basic shapes together on a 3D printer and then print it out. And then I realized, oh, there are problems with how to play this. It's like
we don't
there's
have pistons for
glue.
fingers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just like with I'm sure absolutely any project, it was realizing like, oh, I can do it, and then there was just more to do, and then more to do, and now I'm still doing it. I'm like, I've actually taken a break recently, but that's because 3D printing is a pain in the ass, and I'm really tired of taking apart my hot end.
Oh my god. Yeah, and cleaning it out and scraping it. And, yeah.
It's the sort of thing. Well, it shouldn't even. It shouldn't be an issue, but it's like, oh, but I had I'm using high temperature, and then I used a large retraction amount, and that caused the hot part of the filament to get pulled into the cold part of the filament, or the cold part of the hot end. And oh man, there's just too much stuff. But I won't bore people too much with microtonal stuff and 3D printing geekery. But there's a whole world of that stuff that I'm also just sort of also stumbling through, in addition to figuring out, just as much as I need to for each video, like learning bits about video production. I'm also, constantly just stumbling through the tech side of 3D printing and firmware and modding and stuff like that.
I see.
Everything, it's all slow.
Yeah. I tried 3D printing for a while, and I was like, holy shit. I wanted to design things. I didn't want to spend 90% of my time on this printer itself. I know that's what some people like, but I was like, yeah, okay, I'm done with this. If I design something, I'm going to send it off to be ordered. But maybe it's better these days. I don't know.
Well, it is a lot better these days, but that is still, to some degree, a divide in the community. It's like, oh, are you part of the 3D printing community because you think it's a really useful tool, or because you think it's a really cool hobby?
Right.
And while I've ended up, and a lot of times just from like cost limitations, you end up doing the more hobby route, right? Because it's like, well, you can do it yourself and it costs less, so it doesn't matter if I want it to be a hobby. It's going to be a hobby until I can afford or I'm willing to invest in the product that does not require my constant vigilance.
Right.
And I guess if I had to provide any advice to anybody, if you want to use 3D printing as a tool, it's getting to the point where you should probably just get a printer that you don't have to fiddle with at all, because it is it's all interesting and can be pretty fun, but it's a pain in the ass. So
absolutely,
I'd probably be better off if I had just, for all the things, like I feel like a lot of things, it's like I shouldn't have paid somebody to do that. I should have just learned how to do it myself. 3D printing was one of the things where I think maybe it's the other way around. Maybe I should have just paid a little more upfront for something that I didn't have to fiddle with, because we all only have so many spoons.
Yeah. Well, I had very specific things I wanted to make, not a ton of things. So I just ended up outsourcing it, right? I just sent my designs to a shop and they print it. And I was like, thank you. Done. Yeah. And it was done way better than anything I could have done. I was like, great, we're done here.
That's super valuable. And then you look at the prices and you're like, oh, it's just so expensive compared to how much it would be. And
not
you gotta
even.
take into account your time.
Yeah, no. Not even close. Right.
I sent you the link to the buy Bitcoin anyway.
Okay, sweet. I'll put that up on
Telegram. That one's, I don't know, I like that one. It's another one, like, none of my Bitcoin songs have gotten that much attention, and to some degree it's because I'm going against the Bitcoin narrative. So like the Bitcoin hive mind is not going to be like, hey, look at this thing making fun of us, and it is very much so making fun of the current-ish Bitcoin narrative.
Okay, nice. I'm gonna put that up in there and share it as well.
Thanks.
All right. Where am I here? Am I muted? No, okay, I'm not muted. I get so used to being muted while I talk for like a minute, and then people are like, you're muted.
Hello.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, it's we've been over an hour here, and don't want to keep you too much longer. And I've gone through, actually still have a few more things on the list, but I think I'll cut it here. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about or to discuss or bring up before we close out?
Yeah, I don't think so. Hey, if anyone listens to this and is willing to to share around any stuff of mine that you think is interesting, that would be great, because like I've mentioned before, I'm not necessarily a marketer. I'm doing my best to put stuff out there, and I think I do a pretty good job, at least in some instances, but I absolutely could use help spreading the word. And so, yeah, give me a look, give me a share if you're feeling it. And I think that's really all I have to add.
All right, yeah, and I'll say also, right, to you and to all of us, skill issue, right? So once we recognize that we have these weaknesses, then it's like, okay, well, either I do it myself or I find somebody to help me. So yeah, let's get together, organize, like you said. We need a aircraft carrier with I don't know the analogy; it's not going to work out, but an aircraft carrier. So. Yeah. So let's do skill issue and get organized and make things move ahead ourselves. Also.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, John. Was there anything you wanted to throw up?
No.
No.
That's a pretty interesting talk.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you, John. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but thank you very much for your time. It was really good to talk with you.
Yeah, you guys too. I'll talk to you guys again soon, I'm sure.
All right, and I'm going to go watch this video with the microtonal keyboard. That is nuts. I love how you have the overhead shot of it so you can actually see this 2D keyboard being played. I love it. I'm going to have that a look at it and share it on the Twitter space also.
Nice. Thanks, dude.
All right. Well, take care, man. It's very good to talk to you.
You too.
Have a good week, and skill issue, everybody.
Get good.
Get good.
Take care.
See you.